Hey friends, it's John. You're on the JRB Tree Climbing channel, and I'd like to show you how I tie the figure 8 on a Bight. So first off, what I'm holding in my hand is a figure 8 end loop. I can create a figure 8 end loop basically two different methods. One is the threaded figure 8, where I am creating a figure 8 knot and then re-threading or retracing the line back through to create this. And that is necessary when we're tying this around a fixed object. If there was an object here, for example, like a belay loop on a rock climbing harness, I would have to tie a trace figure 8 or a threaded figure 8. But when I'm tying it for another application where I can place an object here, like a carabiner or other device, well, then I can tie it a lot easier, and I can tie it using a figure 8 on a Bight technique. And we typically do that near the end of the rope. But it's really not a lot more difficult than tying a figure 8, but there are some details. So first, let's go ahead and inspect the finished product. And there's some very important subtleties, and I'll point that out right away. When tied properly, in order to ensure that the knot is also easily untied after a significant load, we want to pay attention to this detail. On the left is the end, and on the right is the load strand. If I follow the end up, it goes around the top of the two strands here, closer to the loop. The end is on top when I hold it this way, and the load strand is on bottom. Now let's get in a little tighter and just inspect the rest of the knot. We got two strands to form that loop, two strands out the bottom. If I kind of just isolate the body of the knot itself, I've got two horizontal bars over two diagonal over two diagonal. If I were to flip it around the other side, it looks remarkably similar. I've got two horizontal over two diagonal over two diagonal. And when finished properly, the knot positions itself in a fairly straight manner. It's not really bent. And when it comes out bent, it's usually an indication that it wasn't tied properly. Now, under significant load, it'll morph a little bit. So let's see at the other end here. I've tied one, and boy, it really looks the same. You really have to hunt to see, but sure enough, if I were to trace the end here on the right, it goes up and now is the bottom, not the top strand. So this is strong, but you would have a lot more difficulty untying it after a load. And so let's make sure we tie it properly. Okay, how do we do that? Well, let's start with a length of cord and make sure that you're familiar with just the regular figure 8. So this is an overhand knot. I think we all have mastered the overhand knot. And a figure 8 knot is simply, instead of going through, I go around the standing part one time and then through. That's a figure 8 knot. So that's prerequisite knowledge, how to tie a figure 8, because we will be tying a figure 8 on a Bight. And it should be that easy, but it's really not. So let me go ahead and show you how we could do this in a sloppy fashion. If I just take this and, I've created a Bight, fold it over, go around the back, create a figure 8. Well, yeah, that is a figure 8 end loop, but if we really get in there and inspect it, even if we try to dress it out properly, you've got some overlapping strands here. We don't want that kind of overlap, and we got overlap down here, and it's caused the knot where the two strands go in the bottom and where they come out the top to be at a bit of an angle. And we might fiddle and diddle with that a lot and twist and turn and get it to look right, and then figure out that the load at the end, and here we've done exactly that. If I follow the end up through, it's on the bottom, not the top. So how do we make sure that doesn't happen? Okay, so here you go. Now, to keep my two strands separated, I'm going to ask you to think of this as a single piece of rope. but in fact it's two. I've joined them together, but I want you to think of it as one so we can pay attention to these strands. So the green that I'm wiggling, that's the load strand, and this is the end. That'll create the tail. I'm going to position that so that the tail end is away from me. It's away from me. And I'm going to simply let that fall over my fingers in this fashion to create a doubled loop. Now, I'm going to call this the outside of my loop. That's the outside, and this is the inside. Now here's the real magic. The only real trick in this is that when we create our figure eight, when I bring this over, I don't want to touch inside to outside. I want to touch outside to outside. You see that? I'm basically bringing this forward and then in the same orientation such that I'm touching outside to outside. And then I finish the figure eight. And I go around and up through. If I do that and carefully dress that out, let's take a look at what we got. So on the left is my end in tan. It goes up. It's the upper strand around my loop and back down. It touches itself. It's the inner and upper loop binding this one. Okay? Let's look at the back. It works perfect every time. Now let's do that with a single rope. I'll do the same thing. I will take the end and put it away from me and the load strand near me. I'll make this one a little longer. I fold this over. I note this is the outside, this is the outside, and I want to touch outside to outside. Great. And now, I'll make this one a little longer. I'll bring this up and through, introducing no other twists and turns. So that's my loop. Let's take a look at it. Here on the left is my end. It goes up. It is the upper and inner strand. I inspect it and I see I have 2 over 2 over 2. I turn it to the other side and again I see that same 2 over 2 over 2. Now before we load this, for example, with our body weight, we really want to set it properly, and we do that by pulling on all 4 ends to set that properly. Now this knot has a number of great applications. So one of them is if I ever want to send in a climbing application, I want to send a loop knot up in a tree and through a tree crotch and back down. Rather than an alpine butterfly or any kind of bowline, I will use the figure 8. It's just less bulky, it's sleek, and it passes through the tree crotch easier. And another very real world application, here is a platform that we use in a saddle hunting application, and I replaced my factory strap with an adjustable one, and I've got a video on that. And here you can see the figure 8 formed just the right size that I can get this over the button, and it won't come off. It won't come off, just kind of like a button on a shirt, unless I want it to, because I control the size of that. The figure 8 end loop is amongst the strongest knots in the book, and you definitely can trust your life on it. Just make sure you tie, dress, and set it properly. Always leave a healthy long tail. I always see folks leaving a questionably short tail. A good rule of thumb is that the tail should be several inches or at least 10 times the diameter of the cordage or rope that you're working with. You know, a few inches is a good rule of thumb. You never want that really short. There you have it. Figure 8 end loop created using a figure 8 on a Bight. Thank you.